Welcome back to the channel, folks. Figured we'd do something a little bit different tonight and just take a quick look at an album that has been being assembled over the last couple of years. We just constantly add a coin here and there, upgrade a coin here and there type of thing, and we got a bunch of these going on, but it's fun to do this on the side, buy a lot of collections, and a lot of these come right out of junk silver or other collections of various means. Most recently picked up a collection. The guy had about 15 really nice AU, mostly 1940s, a couple 1930s walkers, so a couple of those went in here, and then we just sell the one that was upgraded. Most of the early dates, 1916 through probably 1923, are going to be lower grade. If they're decent, they end up going to PCGS. That's the problem. Anything fine or very fine or better, it'll sit in the album for a few weeks maybe, or a few months even. But ultimately I end up usually sending those coins in. As a matter of fact, there are quite a few that are on their way back tomorrow or Tuesday, today being Sunday, June 1st. I'm expecting two PCGS submissions back. They're scheduled to arrive Tuesday. They might come back as early as tomorrow. There's a small 11 coin submission which has a couple 09S Lincoln cents, and then there's a 1916 Walker that I think is about a fine 15, maybe a VF20. I believe there's a 1919S similar grade, 1923S similar grade, and one or two others. And then there's the overdate Standing Liberty Quarter that will be back as well. I haven't looked at the grade results of any of those, but I'm really hoping we get a straight grade of at least a fine 15 on that overdate. I don't see anything that would hold it back or have it graded differently, but it is an expensive coin. It's obviously one that you don't see all that often, so I don't really have much to compare it to, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The other Standing Liberty Quarters are either regular submission or economy submission, and they're still a few weeks away. We are listing some of the coins that I didn't send to PCGS raw on eBay, listing them all as lightly or very lightly cleaned. And some of those probably would grade straight. Some of them have just a few wispy hairlines or just have a hint of I just hesitated to send them in, but some of them definitely wouldn't have graded, but a couple of them pretty close. But anyway, about this album here, it's nothing special, just something different, something fun. I took the slider window out and we'll work backwards, figure in the better coins for the end, if you will. I'm only putting the glove on so I can handle them a little bit more without getting chastised in the comments. So 47D, low end AU in my opinion, like an AU 50, probably 53. See if we can get decent lighting here. I'm not going to analyze every single coin, and we'll just take a cursory look at most. So I would call that like a 53. Yeah, all right. 1947, probably a little better. 55, maybe even a 58. Lighting is not the greatest. Let me see if we can improve that. Hold on. My constant battle until I crack down or loosen up and get a real camera and a real setup. We're just going to have to deal with amateur hour here. So while I try to figure out the best angle and the best way of doing this. Yeah, just slightly better than the last one. Again, nothing special here. Just a nice AU 55 or even 58. You look at the highest point of the coin. The top of the breast where the neck meets the breast is one of the highest points on the coin, and you've got full feathers, nice frosty luster. And on the obverse, we're looking at the top of the breast and a few other areas along the leg and kneecap, always down around the sandal. Let's see, just got to take a look at an alert on my phone. Sorry about that. 46S. And again, we're not going to look at every single coin. This one looks like it has some hairlines, a couple, and some of these are definitely cleaned. This one, you know, I know you see those marks. I wouldn't say they're cleaning, but it probably would be lightly cleaned. It's a little glossy, a little bright. So I'll say this one is lightly cleaned. Very common, the 1946S. It's a little more flatter on the breast. Sometimes it's difficult to differentiate strike from wear, but sometimes it's not. This one, now we're, you know, down a grade here. I don't know why this one isn't better, but I probably had a better one that I sold. And this is just like a nice XF. Regular 46, extremely close. Sorry, this is a 46D, sorry. Yeah, XF 40, flatter breast. A little better date, nothing to write home about. Not a bad coin. XF 40, graphite pencil shaving color, if you will. Here's the 46 plain. I had a bunch of these, and I elected to keep this one for the toning. Not sure how good it's going to look on camera, but you know, I could replace this with 2 or 3 others right now. At the moment, this is the one that's in the album. Essentially to give it a little bit of color, a little bit of brownish sunset. Yeah, probably an XF 40 as well, maybe a 45. It's a little bit more detail and just a tiny bit of trace luster going around the peripheries. So let's put the slider back in so when I turn the page, they don't all come crashing out. And we'll take a quick overview at the next page. 39 through 41S up top. Middle row, 42 through 43. And then down the bottom, 43D through 45S. We're going to take those window slider things out, whatever you want to call them. And we probably won't zoom in on too many of these ones. Some of them are, most everything after 1934 is at least XF. So like this 1940. I just sent a beautiful 40S into PCGS that I think is a legitimate shot of an MS-64 or better. So we were left with this one, which is about a 45. This 39D is not terrible. Nice clean fields. Clean meaning not too many contact marks, not cleaned. Nice full breast. We get a little bit of luster rolling around. This one I have is like a 53 or a 55. Probably a 55. It's got that powdery white Walker luster that most of us that have ever handled any in that AU to mint state grade range are familiar with. Skip past the 39S. We're not going to look at all 73 coins. Here is a 39 plain toning. Probably an XF 45. Nice toning. Let's see. So 40S that's in the set now, after sending in that mint state one. Probably pretty close to AU. Could be a 50 or a 45. And then we have a very deeply toned 1941. I've had this for a while. Too bad it has that mark up by the T in Liberty. It's actually quite attractive. Certainly better than the... I know you're sick of hearing me whine about my camera work. I'm going to try to keep this video to under 25 or 30 minutes at the most, so we're already at 10 and a half. Like that coin, 41D. This one is not wanting to come out. I have to go the other way. But you know what? I'm not going to bother with it because it's just too much work. So what we'll do is we'll take the camera to the coin. And that's a pretty nice 55 or 58. Maybe we can do it this way. There's another one, probably 50, AU 50 probably on that 41S. Let me take the slider out of the next row. I'll take it out of the next 2 rows. Since the next row is only 4 coins. Excuse me, I can't clear my throat. Probably easier to take the camera to the coins, I guess. 42, we won't get to see the reverse though, I suppose. Another one that's about an AU 50. And 42D, probably a 55, maybe probably a 55. The 42S is very nice, might be mint state. I believe it is. Same with the 43. Let's take those last 2 out, as common as they might be. We'll get a closer look. Start from the right side, which is the 43, one of the most, if not the most common date in the entire series. So we see a tiny bit of wear over the thighs, so we're going to call this a 58. And a little bit of wear up, just a hint. But it's got pretty much full luster. And no hairlines or nice wholesome look. Let's have a closer look at the 42S, which I think is pretty close to mint state. I'm looking right in that center area. Tricky. Probably would be a 58. It just doesn't have the same, the luster just doesn't roll over that very high spot. If you watch the way the light reflects to the left and right, north and south of it, you see I can catch the light right by her behind there, right under her left hand, Yeah, I would say that that's just a smidgen of wear. This would be your textbook 58. The reverse is pretty much fully mint state. So that would be more like cabinet or pocket friction. You know, the way you see the luster just totally flows over the whole reverse, the highest centered points. There's no interruption or break at all. Versus right in that midpoint, like right in the midpoint of that circle. Geometry class. All right, spend an awful lot of time on these 1940s. That was not the intention. Let's see if there's anything worth zooming in on here. That 43D, XF 45-ish, maybe cleaned. 43S. That has some nice toning. That's probably an AU 53 or 5. Lower end AU1, the 44. The 44D is pretty nice. 44S looking bright. We'll have to take a closer look. It looks cleaned at first blush. 45, nice. 55, 58. These are all 55, 58 range. We won't look at every single one of them in detail, but we will take a closer look at the 44S, which looked like it might have been cleaned. now that I'm looking at it a little bit closer, I don't really think it's cleaned. Yeah, maybe in that top right, you can see a little bit of, not sure if that's from cleaning as much as it is just friction. But either way, it's a very common coin worth, you know, not a whole lot more than its melt value. $10 over, you know, maybe double melt at the most. Nice coin though, has to fill the, does a purpose and fills the hole. Let's see, this 45. Again, AU 55-ish. Yeah, a little flat on the top of the brass, very slightly. And then, let's see, 45D. Trying to get it in focus. Yeah, low end AU. And 45S. And then we'll turn the page. Toned. AU 50, 53. Yep. All right, let's put these sliders back in. First of June, summer is right around the corner from a seasonal standpoint. All right, we get to the page 2 of the album. And you can see the coins are a little bit more worn. Once we get to 29D is probably an XF, low end AU. The 29S is like a VF. Most are all probably XF. Well, they're above 34S barely. Maybe that 35D. We'll have to take a closer look. We'll take the window panes out, if you will, and we'll see what we got. So we'll start from the top. We have a 23S. That's I have one at PCGS, so this was the lesser of a few. Probably a fine 12. We're looking for full rims. We're looking for no lettering bleeding into the rim. And we're looking for some three-dimensionality. We don't see a lot of eagle feathers. We see about half the skirt lines. We see just the beginning of the outline of Liberty's right breast. But we do see strong, thick, bold rims. And the lettering and the wording and so forth all look pretty good. And let's go to the 27S. Similar grade. Maybe a fine 15. Probably a fine 12. Yeah, probably a fine 12. 28S. A little more meat on this one here. This one's probably a fine 15. Almost all the skirt lines. detail all the way around, so yeah, probably a fine 15. Close to a VF, actually. Got a 28S at PCGS along with a 27S. This 29D is lightly cleaned, but it's about VF 35, close to XF detail on this one. A little better date. I'd like to see a little more three-dimensionality on the breast for XF, so I think that's probably just shy of XF. You do have the full breast line and some three-dimensionality on the leg and so forth, but probably just shy. So again, we don't want to look at every single coin. That 29S is probably a fine 15, very similar to the 28S. 33S, take a look at that one. It's close to XF. Another one slightly better date, probably just shy of XF, a little bit too much wear for my liking for XF in the fields and on those high points of the devices. Maybe I'm just a little stricter than many, but got a little bit of disfigurement on the rim, but I don't think that would hinder the grading so much. I think I would straight grade that. Probably a VF 30 to 35. Tone 1934. Probably an XF 40 or 45, probably a 45. It's got the luster for a 45 and not a lot of wear. Very common. $34D. Looks a little cleaned. XF 45 details, if you will. Lightly cleaned. All right, the 34S is probably a VF 30, 35. 35 is cleaned, AU 50-ish. $35 DNS, not XF-ish. 36. All of these in that XF lower end AU area. Take a look at that 37. Seems to be better than the rest. And this is more AU. Pretty nice. Probably a 55. Probably a 55. 37 DNS are better dates. We'll take a look and see what we got here, because I don't even remember. These have been replaced a handful of times over the recent past. Looks a little pasty, but looks better in hand. Trust me on that. The lighting is terrible. It definitely looks cleaned on camera. One eye on the camera, one eye on the coin, and it's just not representing what it truly looks like in hand. It's not great, but I wouldn't call it cleaned either. 37S is a little more worn. Probably an XF40. Could be as low as a 35. If I remember correctly, this 1938 was pretty nice. It's got that graphite toning to it. Kind of graphite on the right and sandy beach on the left. Our left, our right. And a little bit brighter on the back. Pretty nice on the high points. You know, it's a tricky coin with all that thick toning. At first blush, how could it be AU? But when you look at that reverse, there's almost no wear. So the thing not to get lost in the translation is we're looking for wear, not so much color. I give that at least an AU 53, possibly a 55. And on our 38D, which is kind of overrated, there's a million of them out there, probably a VF 30 or 35. It's got a low mintage, but it's not that low, almost a 500,000 coins, and most of them are still in existence. So not that tough a coin. All right, we'll move on to the last page, and we are at 27 minutes. A lot of the time is spent trying to put these sliders back in though. Especially with one glove on. All right, we'll turn to the opening page of the album. 1916 through 17s, 18 through 19, and then 19D through the 21s. So let's take the sliders out and take a closer look at page 1. We just had like 3 or 4 full albums of these, and sold off a bunch of 1921 of all mints, many that could have, maybe should have gone in for grading, that they were close. Almost all of them had just a few hairlines or something that gave me a slight bit of hesitation, and I ended up not sending them in. That 18S is cleaned. XF detail thereabouts. So the 21 PD and S are all about very good. I think the 21S is pretty close to a fine. This 1916, again, a better one is at PCGS. It'll be back here tomorrow or Tuesday. It's probably a VG8. You got your full rims. And then 16D, same with the 16S. I had a nice VG10 PCGS that I sold. This is probably, it's close to a fine, might be just fine 12. And the 16S is cleaned. Very good. VG8, close to a 10. This 1917 is pretty close to XF. common date. Couple hairlines, so we'll call it XF details. And then we've got the mint marks, 17D on the obverse. Probably a good 6, maybe a VG8, close. 17D reverse, VG10, maybe a fine 12. S obverse, same thing, pretty close, maybe a VG8. And then on the reverse, very similar. They're all about VG8, VG10. 18 is probably close to a fine 12. 18D is about a fine 15. That 18S, we'll take it out. It's an XF detail cleaned. I'm laughing as I'm just like watching some auction sell for crazy money on eBay. I sold a bank wrapped roll, original bank wrapped roll of 1957 pennies in a Federal Reserve Bank wrapper, unopened, unmessed with. Really nice roll, and I think it closed at $27. I just saw another one sell, not as nice. Generic shotgun wrapper, no bank, just a red and black, unopened. I know the seller, good guy. Nothing, no questioning the authenticity or the legitimacy of it being an original bank wrapped roll from the right generation. But it sold for $157, and gray sheet on that roll I think might be $20. It might even be less. This 1919 is a nice original, probably a VG8 or 10. That's a good date. Any of the 1919s are good dates. I can't remember the quality of the remaining 1919s. This 19D is probably should be sent into PCGS. I think it's a fine 12. You got a little more on the breast. You got just a little more depth. Look at how complete and bold the rim is. See the separation, the sun, that crack there. You've got definition there. When that bleeds into the rim, you're going to have a hard time getting a fine. Look at the ground above the 1919, that thick line. Remember, the skirt lines aren't going to be as bold on the pre-21s. They changed the hubs after 1921, and you got more detail on the skirts, even on the circulated. The rim is worn, always wears quickest over here at 9 o'clock. You've still got a full rim. It's just weak. But I don't see anything that would prevent this from a fine 12 and possibly a 15. Possibly a 15. Nice original coin from, in my eye, on a pretty tough date. It's probably a couple $100. And this 1919S, I had a whole bunch of them. I sent the one that's at PCGS. It's probably a VF20. Might be a fine 15. But this one here, VG10, probably just shy of fine. We got that separation, the sun. We've got good depth around the rim. We got a little bit of breast, just a little flat going. Look how flat the face is. When it's that flat, the whole vertical of the body. And then this is kind of pancake flat. I don't think we'll get the fine if we were to, it's just too smooth. It's too slick. This is a tiny rim. That rim bump means nothing at this level. Yeah, they're going to VG10 this 9 times out of 10. I don't, it, at first blush, a lot of people would give that a fine, but I don't think so. I really don't think so. 1920, common date. VF details cleaned. In that VF30 range. Details, of course. Then one of the more elusive dates in the series. I can never seem to find a good one. I did have a good one and I sold it. This 20D. Again, it's right there on the cusp of a fine. And that's an accomplishment for this coin. We do have a pretty ugly reverse, that toning streak going down that. Starting around 1 o'clock, ending up around 5 o'clock. It's kind of dirty. Probably an acetone bath may help it, but don't want to mess with it too much. Get some of that crud out of there. It's bordering on environmental damage. So dark up under the above and beneath the shoulders and so forth. A lot of that carbon buildup wouldn't hurt to get it out of there with an acetone bath. So it's probably close to a fine 12. This 20S seems to have a little more meat to it. Dirty, toned, fine 15 maybe. And probably a VF the way it's shimmering and reflecting. A little more full. Dirty. Close. VF20 would be my final answer. All right, 1921 PD&S to wrap up the video, and here's a 21P. And I forgot what I had in here, so I could probably go to PCGS. I think it's a fine, which puts it somewhere close to 500 bucks if they get the fine 12 or 15, maybe 400 bucks. For the 21P, I haven't really looked at their prices lately. I think it's at least a fine 12. I think it's got all the components. Just has that fine look. It's a fine specimen. Pun intended. 21D, I believe this one is similar, maybe a little flatter. This one may earn the VG 10.5 award. VG 11, is there a grade? If there was, this one may get it. Yeah, I think it's just shy of fine. Too flat. Too flat. It's just too flat. That's what she said. Or that's what he said. Never mind. Never mind. Yeah, VG10 for that 21D. And then this last but not least, almost fell into the crevasse of the Dansco album, Void, 21S. It's got some toning that's probably not going to show up well. But if I can get the camera just right, you get some rose and violet colors up around the top. It doesn't look like it's going to cooperate. But here we are, another one that's, see, this one's not quite as flat and a little more definition. A little more definition to everything, a little more roundedness. I think this just makes fine. But all three of those 21s are pretty similar and not bad for an album set. So that is that. And we can look at this nice Washington Quarter album next when we do the next album. It's missing a few coins, but it's probably 85–90% full, and everything that's in there is mint state with the exception of a couple of higher end AUs, and I don't think there's any clean coins in there. There might be one or two very lightly clean coins, but I was pretty fussy putting that together, which was done. I haven't put a coin in that album since I think 2021. And it's not for, I haven't really been actively trying, but I also haven't come across any of the coins that I was missing. And I had a lot of original rolls of quarters from the 40s and 50s, and I was actually able to take the finest specimen out of the roll, out of each roll that I had. And that's why I think the album came out pretty nice. There's a lot of MS66s. 65 and 66 being predominantly the grade of most of those coins, but we'll talk about that in a future video. The next video coming up will be later this week with the return of those submissions. The over-date Standing Liberty Quarter, 1918 over 17S, and a few other things, and we'll get the rest of them back in a few weeks. So feel free to leave a comment, like the video if you're so inclined, subscribe if you're so inclined, and you can reach us at samscoinsandheavymetal@gmail.com. Find us on eBay under the same name, samscoinsandheavymetal _ in between each word, usacoinbook.com. If you haven't been there, seems to attract a more sophisticated crowd of collectors, not as much of the riffraff that eBay gets. I won't comment on Whatnot or some of the other platforms, but USA Coin Book does seem to have a better crowd, if that makes any sense. But you can find me there at Jimmy Page's Great with underscores in between each word. And samscoinsandheavymetal.com, our website, is being professionally renovated and should be up and running in the next few weeks. Thanks for your time, guys. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, what's left of it. We'll catch you next time.